Welcome back. Our last lecture for Chapter 5, we're going to talk a little bit about burns and the rule of nines, which is a method by which you can estimate the percentage of the body that has been covered by a burn. You've probably heard that before, where somebody was burned across 40% of their body. So we'll talk about how those types of estimations can be made. All right, so what do we mean by a burn? Of course, that's going to be some type of damage to the body that can be caused by heat, obviously, like from flames, electricity. You can have electrical burns that damage the body. Radiation can cause burns. That's including UV light is a type of radiation from the sun that can cause sunburn. But other types of more dangerous radiations can cause burns as well, such as the radiation that they use for cancer treatments. You have to be careful with that. Those, they shoot radiation towards a tumor through the skin, and that's going to burn the skin in that area. And then certain types of chemicals can cause burns as well. So when you have a burn, what you're experiencing is tissue damage. Cells wind up dying due to the burn. The intense heat denatures proteins. What do we mean by that? So proteins have three-dimensional shapes to them. If a protein becomes denatured, it loses that 3D shape. That's what that means, loss of 3D shape. All right, so guess what? So we've talked about how proteins are so important to the function of the cells in our bodies, so many different jobs. That function is dependent upon them having a three-dimensional shape to them, just like anything else. So if they lose a three-dimensional shape, they're no longer going to be able to do what they're supposed to do. So if you've got a protein that's supposed to be breaking down, helping you break down glucose for energy, if it loses its three-dimensional shape and it can no longer attach to glucose, it's not going to do that anymore. And cells die due to burns as well. All right, your biggest threats when you have a burn, what are the things you've got to be the most concerned about with patients immediately? Dehydration and loss of electrolytes, electrolyte imbalance. So you're supposed to maintain things like sodium and potassium. Those are electrolytes because they have charges. Those are ions in your body fluids. They have to be maintained within certain homeostatic ranges in order for you to function properly. And when you have a burn, you're at risk for the levels becoming imbalanced pretty quickly. And a lot of that is due to dehydration. Now, why are you dehydrating with a burn? What have you lost during a burn? If you lose the epidermis, remember how we said the epidermis, one of its key functions is to be a barrier to water loss. It has that watertight seal that keeps water in, it keeps water out. If you lose the epidermis, your body water, not only is it going to seep out through the burn, it's going to leak out, but also it's going to evaporate out from the body as well. What else do you think is a big time problem with burns? What else did we say the skin is functioning as a barrier against? What are burn patients really going to be at risk for? What do you have what are you getting exposed to out here in the environment and from on the surface of your skin that you want to keep out of the body? Lots of things, but especially microorganisms, bacteria, viruses, some types of fungi like yeast are actually a type of fungi. Those types of things are being kept out of your body by the epidermis. So when your epidermis is gone over a portion of your body, those nasty little microscopic germs can get inside your body and cause infections. And that's one of the things that can pretty quickly kill burn patients. If the burns are severe enough, they're going to be at risk for infections as well. All right, so what is the rule of nines? This is a method by which you can estimate the burn coverage on a patient. And so it's based on dividing up the body into 9 percentage sections, or things that can be multiplied by 9 to give you some number. Okay, so for example, if you 9% of your skin surface area is covering the anterior and posterior head and neck. So anterior and posterior, this is 9% of your skin surface area. So if you had a burn all the way across the anterior side, all the way across the face, that would be about half of that. So that would be a 4.5% burn coverage. Okay, let me erase all that. All right, how about your anterior and posterior upper limbs? So right there and right there. I'm sorry, that should go down there as well. Each of your arms is about 9%. So if you just had a burn all the way across the anterior side, that would be about 4.5%. Posterior side would be about 4.5%, half of that. If both your right and your left arms were completely burned on both sides, what would your burn coverage be? It would be about 18% in that case, because you got 4.5 on the anterior and 4.5 on the posterior side for each arm. So you add that up and you get to 18%. All right, your anterior trunk, if you take 9 times 2, you get 18. Anterior trunk has about 18% of your skin surface area. Posterior trunk also has about 18%. So together they make up about 36% of your skin surface area. So what if somebody said, hey, this person has about half of the anterior trunk has been burned? That would be about a 9% coverage. What if a patient, hey, this patient, about half of the posterior trunk and the posterior side of the left arm has been completely burned. So half of the posterior trunk would be about 9%. Posterior part of the left arm would be about 4.5%. Put those together and you've got 13%. So you can see how they use this to kind of estimate the skin coverage, skin surface area that has been burned. Each leg is about 18% of your skin surface area. So if you're just thinking about the anterior side, it's going to be 9% for each leg. Posterior side, 9% for each. And then the one area that's not included, the perineum, that's the area between the genitals and the anal opening. That's only about 1% of your surface area. Now, why is this important? Why are they concerned with this? Because the percentage of your skin surface area that has been destroyed due to a burn is going to let the medical personnel know, how serious the patient is at risk for dehydrating, losing body fluids. The more easily you dehydrate and lose body fluids, the more likely you are to die quickly, because you're not going to be able to maintain your blood volume. If you can't maintain your blood volume, you're not going to be able to circulate blood to all of your tissues. You're not going to be able to supply the cells in your body with oxygen gas and with nutrients. All right, how about a burn classification? So some types of burns are called partial thickness burns, and what that partial thickness means, the burn is not going all the way through the epidermis and the dermis, not all the way through, it just goes part of the way through. So if you have a first-degree burn, what that means is only the epidermis has been damaged, and some signs and symptoms of that would be redness, edema, that's a clinical term for swelling, and of course you're going to have, that was a pretty loud thing. Very loud clapping thunder. I think I'm going to have to let that finish before I continue. All right, so when you have a burn, you have that redness on the skin due to a burn, like maybe you have a minor sunburn, or maybe you touched a hot stove, something like that. What that does is it triggers inflammation, because your skin is now damaged. So inflammation is this response. Those mast cells down in your dermis send these chemical signals into the blood, and they recruit in the troops to come in and help fight any infections or clean up the damage that is taking place. Also, your blood vessels dilate. When you have inflammation anywhere in the body, your blood vessels dilate. That's what causes the redness. Remember, we said any skin redness is caused by increased blood flow. And edema, the swelling, is caused because fluid comes out of the blood and gets into the tissues around the burn. You have increased blood flow, and the blood vessels become leakier to let all of these nice things out of your blood that are going to help you clean up the damage. And so because of that, you wind up with swelling. The swelling is what leads to the pain that you feel, those nerve endings that detect pain. Send that signal to your brain so you feel pain there. All right, if you have a second-degree burn, that is the epidermis has been burned, and you're also getting down into the upper part of the dermis. So it's beyond just the epidermis. You're down into the dermis as well. A sign of that happening is that you have blisters. So if you've ever had a blistering sunburn before, you actually had a second-degree burn from that. So that's more serious. When you have a blister, the epidermis is actually peeled off from the underlying dermis. That's what you're seeing, and you're getting fluid inside the blister. What you're actually seeing there, that's your tissue fluid. That's that interstitial fluid, which has leaked out of blood vessels in the area and has filled up the space in that location. So you're seeing that edema, or that swelling underneath the blister. All right, a full thickness burn, what's going on there? Full thickness means the burn has damaged the entire epidermis and dermis in the area and is extending even deeper, at least down into the hypodermis. So all of the skin is damaged. You can have a gray, white, cherry, red, black color. This obviously is going to be the most serious type of burn. Patient initially may not feel pain in the burned areas, and that's because the nerve endings there have been destroyed. The pain sensors are gone. Usually you have to do skin grafting, where you move skin from one location of the body and replace skin on the surface, or they can do artificial or laboratory grown skin grafts as well to provide some coverage there. You've got to replace the skin that has been removed. Otherwise, the patient is extremely susceptible to dehydrating and extremely susceptible to infection. Those are the two most immediate concerns in a patient who has experienced a burn. All right, I'm going to finish up. That concludes our Chapter 5 lectures for you. I am going to have a couple of additional lectures here in Unit 2, where I want to, actually 3, because we want to discuss a little bit more about your body fluids, so you guys have a little bit more of an understanding of how your body fluids work before we move on. In our A&P class here. We're also going to talk a little bit more about metabolism and how your cells harness energy that they need to power all these fun things that they need to do to help keep you alive. And then we're also going to talk just a little bit about, we've been talking about all these proteins in the skin, like keratin, or in your tissues, like collagen and elastic proteins. And there are many other examples of proteins that do incredibly important things in the body. And we've talked a little bit before about how your genes on your DNA are blueprints, or like chemical recipes, chemical written instructions that tell your cells how to manufacture all those proteins. We're going to talk just a little bit. We're not going to get into the super gory details, but we're going to talk about how all that works, just to provide some additional background information for us as you continue to move through the anatomy and physiology class. So those little extra side lectures here at the end of Unit 2 will finish out the Unit 2 physiology.